You're listening to Robinson Ventures Radio, where ingenuity meets innovation.
Good afternoon, Sean Robinson. Happy to be here on our latest episode of Robinson Ventures Radio. And with me today is Patti. And Patti, will you please introduce yourself, your title, your role, and your organization?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Patti Keckeisen. I work for a national nonprofit called the National Parent Leadership Institute. I reside in the western part of the state of Connecticut, but we're a national nonprofit. My role there is that of Director of Quality. What I love about my role, among other things, is that I get to work with everybody on everything because quality matters. So it's internal as well as external. We have a value that's reflected in our slogan where we talk about fidelity to our model. We help create change in communities by bringing parent voice to democracy tables. The concept of quality matters in that we believe that we can create a healthier democracy by way of parent leadership. And so we include parent voice in everything that we do. And so we look at our internal processes, systems, and structures, as well as those in the communities in which we work. When communities and organizations are faithful to our model of implementation, the impacts in communities are pretty extraordinary.
Give us an example of a project that you guys would go and implement.
The National Parent Leadership Institute works in communities and with organizations to implement an initiative that we call the Parent Leadership Training Institute, PLTI. And I call it an initiative and not a program because it is about inspiring community change. So it is not just a start and end type of a program. It's the start of a change that happens in a community to bring parent voice and parent leadership into the equation of systems and businesses and such. So when we implement PLTI in a community, what happens is someone in a community comes to us and says, we've done everything from nutrition to child rearing to all types of parent education types of topics. But what we need now is we need parents to be seated at decision-making tables to inform the programs, practices, and policies in this community. And we believe that PLTI can help us do that. They know that because we have proven outcomes. So we're one of the very few that this has been going on, by the way, since 1992 in Connecticut, right? Okay. So we have more than 30 years, right, of evidence to prove this. When we work with the community, it's almost as if we're clairvoyant and we can say to them, this is what's going to change for you. Because we have studied every participant in every classroom all over the United States and in Australia, because our curriculum is so good and our process of implementation is so good. And if you are faithful to our model of implementation, you can anticipate these outcomes. It's very exciting work because it's about creating community change and it's about democracy and civics. It's about reminding parents that not only are they leaders in their families at home, but they're leaders in the community. They can impact programs, policies, and practices at every level. So people come to us and say, let's implement PLTI. And we say, great. If you're really committed to doing this, these are the ingredients that make the bread rise. Because we've tested this. We know that this is what you need. So it starts with a foundation of civics. You need to create what we call a civic design team, which is a true cross-section of your community that believes in parent voice towards healthy democracy. People who really get this. And so it's people from business, it's people from health systems, it's people from small and large businesses, it's parents, it's nonprofits. And they get together and they put together a plan and they work with us. And basically, we offer this Parent Leadership Training Institute as a 20-plus week Harvard-level course on civics and democracy for families that has all the family supports in place that enable parents to participate. It's held at a time of day that matters. We start with a family meal. The children are in on-site quality childcare, while parents are in the 3-hour class once a week. Parents who take the class tell us I wasn't really sure what I was getting into. I knew it was about leadership, and I sort of felt like I was a leader, but what I really uncovered is the leader that was deep within me.
You can hear the passion coming through in your voice, right? And how dedicated you are to this work. So talk to us about what's the why behind what drives that, right?
I grew up in a town in Long Island, New York, outside of New York City, and I was the first in my family to attend college. Actually, my older brother tried and failed, and being 11 years older than me, he wound up being drafted into the Vietnam War. Luckily, he stayed stateside, so there was a blessing in that. But for my father, who had been a World War II veteran and part of the liberation of the Dachau concentration camp, his son being drafted into the army was the worst thing that could have happened. I grow up a bit, I go to college, and my parents say, well, you'll go to the community college because that's what's nearby. So even though I graduated at the top of my class, I went to community college, then went on to a 4-year school. So I typically say that I'm a graduate of Fairfield University, which is a Connecticut Jesuit school that I adore. But the true story is that I started off with an associate's degree from Nassau Community College, which I really am very proud of. I studied business there because that's what my parents told me that I should do. My mother had the highest job she could have in the 1950s. She was the executive secretary to the president of a paper company in Lower Manhattan. And she said, so in high school, you're going to take STEM and typing because this is how you reach success, right?
Right.
And so my notes were great in college because I could, everybody wanted my notebooks if I could only tell
Right.
you. But so I did well in school. I studied business. I became a computer programmer in the corporate world in 1981.
COBOL, Fortran, right?
Mainframes.
Pascal, right? Yes, mainframes.
Mainframe computers that took up an entire floor of an office building, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And so I did that for a number of years. Interestingly, during that time, American Can sold off a part of their business to James River Corporation. And so they were run by two gentlemen. Both were engineers in paper making pulp technology, right? But one of them was more of an industrial psychologist, and he started something at James River Corporation called the James River Institute. And we were all required to take extensive trainings, 5-day long away classes in leadership management in the organization. This was in the 80s when people weren't talking about leadership. They were talking about management. MBAs were the big thing, right? But they were talking about leadership. And so somehow I knew as I was taking these classes on facilitation skills, meeting skills management, decision-making protocols, I knew that this was something that was going to be valuable to me. And I still have the binders from those classes in my basement. I knew that that was life-changing for me. As time went on, I became the director of quality for the IT department of James River Corporation in Norwalk, Connecticut, learned all about how to facilitate change. And it was about employee voice and pushing decision-making down to the lowest levels in organizations. And
the Demings, Cotter, all this change management theory, right? And you know that change, of all things in an organization, culture and change are the two hardest things to implement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, and yet, and though, even though IT was not really my thing, I just knew that this other part of it was what mattered to me, about creating change and about bringing voice to people. So years later, after James River moved out of Norwalk and I was home raising children, I still had those binders in my basement about communication skills and facilitation and things like that. I wound up getting involved in my community because I was suddenly home with 2 children under the age of 2. I felt like when I came home and closed my garage door behind me, that I closed the moat and I was sort of, isolated from the rest of the world in some way. I started getting involved in community. At this point, this is the later 90s, and people said to me, well, you were a facilitator in corporate. You might like to hear about this Parent Leadership Training Institute that we're bringing into the city of Danbury. The woman who initiated it is brilliant. It's going to be a big deal. And so they sent me to training to be a PLTI facilitator. I met Elaine Zimmerman, who is the founder of the program. And when she talked about democracy, everything else faded to black in the background. She had me at democracy. And that meant so much to me because it reminded me my people came here from somewhere.
Yeah.
How were they welcomed? How did they learn to know the system?
Were they brought here of their own accord even? Our folks chose, right? I mean,
right.
My folks are, half of us are Italian, right? That emigrated in the late early 1900s.
Yep.
The other were Irish, Scott, English, and French Canadian, right? They came over due to, famine, war, right? But so much, and we don't talk about, so much of the population in the United States was brought here against their will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I come from a community that welcomes immigrants. So Danbury, Connecticut has the lowest unemployment rate in the state. We are a small city, but of hardworking people. The majority of our students now are immigrant students. So all of this, so the culture of my own community, the thinking about democracy, the thinking about the ancestors who came here before me, made me feel a certain type of responsibility to make democracy even stronger. When I wasn't selected to serve as a facilitator of that PLTI program, I applied to be a parent in it. And so in 1999, when my kids were in first and second grade, I took PLTI in the city of Danbury, which was a 20-week Harvard-level course on civics and democracy that's delivered sort of at a middle school level. I was elbow to elbow with other community members. We were all so distinct from one another. That's the beauty of PLTI and the beauty of democracy, is that it welcomes everyone. And so when you seat a class of PLTI, you seat a class that is a authentic reflection of the community outside the classroom. Among the different people in the room, we spoke 13 different languages, and we came from different countries, and we were old and young and of different family structures and beliefs. And it was a life-changing experience. My kids came with me every week. I did a community project to help change the community in some way. It was then that I said, this is what I'm doing the rest of my life. I know this is what I'm doing the rest of my life, because I see the commonality that we all have. I see that we all believe and want the best for our children, but we don't all have equal access and opportunity to make the positive changes that are needed for it. So let's keep doing this. Since 1998, this is what I've been doing. This is my why. And somehow the experience of going through the weekly classes lit something inside of me. It's almost as if I felt the presence of ancestors around me saying, yes, this is what you need to do. This is what matters. This is a value that reflects the family value.
I'd just like to point out real quick that in roughly 17 minutes and 30 seconds, we've used all of the keywords that are on the front page of the Robinson Ventures website.
There you go. I'm delighted that you feel like we're on point.
Yes, ma'am. We are very much on point. Robinson Ventures, we deliver our service with excellence and integrity, right?
Yeah.
We talk about transparency. We talk about, how we bring different backgrounds, different knowledge sets to the table to create solutions for our clients, right? Now, we do it in healthcare and higher ed, right?
Yep.
To me, when I hear what you're talking about, Patti, you're while you're working in democracy, and you're giving parents the voice that they need to advocate for themselves, their families, and their communities, there's a whole layer of the healthcare ecosystem that if that doesn't happen, right, healthcare outcomes go in the toilet for that community.
Right.
And it's part of the solutioning around social drivers of health.
Yes, those social determinants of health, love them. What happens in PLTI is this, is that parents apply and are interviewed and then selected into a community initiative of PLTI. It's free. They get dinner every week with the on-site quality childcare that I told you about, help with transportation if they need it. And they are asked, even on the application, what concerns you about children today? And those concerns get addressed in the class because every participant works on a community civic project. And it goes back to that question of what concerns you for children today. Fast forward, when you think about, I don't know, 15,000 plus graduates from across the United States and in Australia over all of these years, what we've learned is that the projects address these areas. 30% address education, from preschool education and beyond. 30% have to do with health and safety. 30% of parents coming to PLTI everywhere are concerned about health in some way. I mean, one thing that happened here in my great little city that I love so much, I've told you so much about, well, we have the largest man-made lake in New England, in Danbury, Connecticut. It's called Candlewood Lake. And every summer, the city offers swimming lessons, free swimming lessons for children. But it wasn't until a PLTI graduate went to the park and rec director and said, well, you know, with the federal laws that you need to be offering similar free swimming lessons to children with special needs. They had never offered until a PLTI graduate reminded them of their law and obligation. And now they do. That's been going on for 20 years. Not only that, but one of the high school teachers actually went back to school and got his second master's degree in special education, and since then has been a special education teacher. Our realm of influence is pretty amazing. So again, community civic projects, 30% have to do with education, 30% have to do with health and safety, and the other remaining is about community development and community improvement. So sometimes our parents are sitting on boards and commissions in cities, but also in states. In my state, we have 2 or 3 state representatives who are PLTI graduates. They didn't have this in mind, but this is what was inspired in them by their participation.
So you don't think parents have abdicated the responsibility? The parents who are engaged with you are actually engaging because they want to further inverse that, right? Not abdicate.
Absolutely.
They want to get further involved. And
Yeah.
so they spin the flywheel. And does that lend itself to the, you get a cohort, and that cohort begets another cohort, or begets another cohort. And so you start the flywheel in that community spinning.
So when you see a class, we're very, very intentional about how we outreach in the community, because again, we are required to be an authentic reflection of the community itself. So when we work with communities, we actually look at census data with them, but we have a conversation that goes beyond the census data, and we ask, who's new? Who is invisible? Who needs to be at the table? We get into some deep soul-searching work.
If you are not intentionally inclusive, you are by definition being exclusive.
Exactly. That's exactly right. These are the things that matter to us. And once you see a class that is that diverse in a community, they help you recruit the next class, because they're going home saying, you got to take this. This is unbelievable. We have classes where we do language justice. Everybody wears headsets, including the facilitators at the front of the room, so that my facilitator, my co-facilitator, and I can be speaking 2 different languages, but working together at the front of the room.
That we talk about health literacy all the time. And folks coming into the ER who are not English speaking, right? Having instructions once they are discharged, being in the language of, I mean, to the point where we've started to use platforms in various different health systems where you may have the doctor speaking English, the patient speaking Spanish, and on the little iPad is a person who's translating as the doctor says, right? Language and inclusivity are so very important in what we do, what you do, but also what is done in healthcare. What's the hardest thing you do?
So what I say is, I can't stop doing this. Like, I'm so charged up by this. I am so inspired by outcomes, no matter where we do them. So we are in like rural Colorado, and we are in the Central Valley of Connecticut, of California, pardon me, where our fruits and vegetables are picked. We are outside of Seattle. We are in Maine. We are in Miami. We're at the White Earth Nation in the state that we call Minnesota. We are in New Orleans, and the outcomes are the same. I'm fascinated by that. So the hardest thing for me is to step away from it. I mean, eventually, right? I guess there's a retirement, but I can't even think about it. The hard thing sometimes with is when people say, well, it's too expensive. And we're like, it's an investment, right? So when people say, well, it's a lot of money, whatever it might be in a community, and it varies because we're so in so many different types of communities. But when people say, well, we can't get the money to do this, that's hard.
So talk to me about how you all are funded, right?
Mhm.
So it sounds to me like combination of contracts, grants. What do you got?
Yeah. So yeah, we are a national nonprofit, and we do not fund our local PLTI communities. The funding for a PLTI in a community comes from the location itself. So they need to do fundraising. It is grants, it's foundations. Sometimes it's national money. Sometimes it's school district money, right? So if we're in a Title I school district, so that's an easy fit. There's a lot of in kind. In Connecticut and in New England, I got to tell you, the Federal Reserve Bank did some amazing things to make money available to working cities. To do our work, we are also grant funded for sure. So we run PLTI in communities, and then the agencies in those communities start to realize that all the good things that are happening are because those parent leaders are now creating change in their agencies.
Do you measure ROI, return on investment? Do you have a calculus to sit there and say, hey, if you come in and run this program, in 12, 18, 24 months, expect to start to see this type of change, which equates to this type of return?
We haven't exactly done that. When this started in the state of Connecticut, it started in state government. The Connecticut Commission on Children was staffed to our state legislators. And so they, at one time, it was so long ago, I have to think about it. It was the 90s. They did an ROI projection of that. We have not done that lately, though, and that I'm writing that down because that's an actual good next step. But what we can say is that 87% of the people who take after PLTI say they're more comfortable working with somebody different than themselves.
So what I talk about all the time is there are dark green dollars and there are light green dollars, right? Your light green dollar is just what you talked about, which is, hey, these people now feel comfortable with working with people that don't look like themselves, having communication, right. So those are the wonderful light green dollars that are changing the community. Right. Then there are the dark green dollars, and those dark green dollars are actually what revenue was driven or what specific costs were reduced because of the implementation of your program or whatever we've been brought in to do, right? And so having the rubric and being able to quantify light green versus dark green, or your various different shades of money, right? Light green, medium green, and dark green dollars is extremely important. And specifically because with what you all do, and again, and this is a limited opinion, right, for our high-level conversation, being able to point to that when you go to sit there and try to sell somebody, you sit there and say, let me tell you, within 24 months, this is what you're going to see from our communities, right? Here are the various different, like light green, middle green, dark green dollars. And that value proposition then spins back, right? Which is now they can go out and internally sell, hey, y'all, if we do this, if we invest $100,000, within 24 months, that $100,000 turns into a collection of 1.5 million of light, middle, and dark green dollars. And this is what it looks like. Right. And it's hard, right? Because what you're doing is so passion-based. It's such a part of your why, and I heard it is hard is when people don't get the why and they try to use the ROI conundrum to disavow the why and not go down the proper path.
Yeah. and the bookkeepers who divide, well, this is how much it costs for the year. We're going to divide that by the 25 parents in the room. No, this is an investment in your community. So
Yeah, they're trying to find some metric to do cost per person. They're being held accountable for stuff like that, right? They're being measured on that. And so understanding how they're measured to get that through and you're able to produce that ROI. Unfortunately, it's, we all wish that our whys and our passion didn't have to have that calculus as part of it, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
but at the end of the
It's a
day,
necessary evil, but that's the dominant culture. This is part of what I love about NPLI is who we are. So NPLI, the National Parent Leadership Institute, is a nonpartisan, parent-centered, and anti-racist organization that partners with parents and communities to equip families with the civic skills, knowledge, and opportunities to be leading advocates for their children at home, at school, and in the community. I love those words.
And so Patti, the final question I'm gonna ask for today is this. What should we have asked you that we didn't?
Don't you want to apply? Don't you want to join a class? We work with the National League of Cities, and finally one of the women said to me, I need to take this. And so because it was COVID,
so I live in combination of Oklahoma, North Carolina, and South Carolina on this. Where in North Carolina and South Carolina do you operate?
Right now, we are not in North Carolina or South Carolina, but because of the lasting impacts, social impacts of COVID, we still have classes that are doing virtual classes. People can connect with me to find out where they're doing virtual classes. Everett Community College, which is in Washington State, is still doing virtual classes. Columbus, Ohio has been doing virtual classes. Not everybody is back in person. And so there's opportunity for people across the United States to join a virtual class with, amazingly enough, the same outcomes as our in-person classes. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, ma'am. Likewise.